It's now after 6 p.m. on the 24th of May, 25th of May, on Tuesday. I'm going to call this meeting of the Grosse Ile Zoning Board of Appeals to order. We'll now stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Before we start, a couple of personal quick announcements. My name is Gary Bailey. I'm the vice chairman of this board. Our chairman, Jim Bittinger, has a medical issue. I hope I speak for everyone here and the staff, wishing Jim a full, speedy, and complete recovery. This is the first in-person meeting we've had in over a year. Somebody can correct me if they have an exact date. I want to take a minute to thank all the doctors and nurses who have treated people with this disease, and to thank all the doctors, scientists, and emergency people, and whoever that helped develop the vaccines to get us to the point we are today. With that, a motion to approve the agenda as it is would be in order.
So moved. Support.
Support. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Agenda is approved. I will waive the reading of the meeting minutes and ask for a motion to approve the minutes as written.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
The meeting minutes are approved. We have one applicant on the agenda tonight. And as our usual procedure, I want to make sure I get Mr. Starzak. Correct me if I'm mispronouncing. Typically, and we'll do this tonight, Brian will give a his brief review. After he's done, we will ask you to come to the mic and present anything you want to present. And if there are people in the audience that want to add something after you're done, we will invite them up. With that said, Brian, the microphone is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. All right, let's roll through this. So our subject site this evening is 9830 Church Road. This is a request to expand an existing non-conforming residence. The subject site is on the north side of Church. If you all can see my cursor on the screen, this is the north side of Church, and it's a little bit east of West River. Site and surrounding properties are all within the R1B single-family zoning district, and the petitioner is before you tonight for two variances. One, to expand a non-conforming residence that does not meet the 90% rule, and two, for an encroachment into the front yard setback. Pertinent sections are 3.5, which are the residential dimensional requirements, and 18.6, which is tied to non-conforming buildings. And then the quick background, I've already kind of said this, but the existing residence is non-conforming due to a deficient front yard setback. It was built at 32 foot, and the current requirement is 40 foot. I do want to, it's mentioned multiple times, I think, in the submittal and in my review letter, and I'll probably say it again, but I do think it's of some value to note that this residence was built in the 1920s. So it greatly predates zoning in this community. So that 32-foot setback probably isn't that uncommon for homes that were built back then. So here's a view of the proposed site plan. So again, if you can follow my cursor, we have Church Road, we have the existing residence in blue, and in red, we have a proposed covered but unenclosed porch that wraps around the side and a portion of the rear of the existing residence. So as you can see, rear setbacks and side setbacks are easily met, no issues there. The two reasons we're here tonight are, one, this established 32-foot setback, and two, this proposed 34-foot setback for the addition of the covered wraparound porch. And I can go back to the plan at any point if anyone would like to see that in further detail. The elevation views of the proposal, so this is the side elevation view of the proposed, again, covered partial wraparound porch. So this is a side, and if you make note of the French doors and the stairs, that will come in handy with the photos I'll show you momentarily. And then this is the rear of the residence, existing again in the background with the door, and then the porch wrapping around. And again, for point of reference to the photos, I will bring to your attention the door and then the steps downward. So the first photo, the photo on the left anyway, is a view existing of the front of the house. So this all stays the same. There are no changes here. The proposed addition would be off to this side. So this is the moving east. So off of this level of the residence. So if you'll recall from the site plan, this portion of the home is 2 feet closer to the road. So there's like a 2-foot projection here, and then this is 2 feet back. So this is the side view, again, the east side, and I referenced the French doors earlier. So these are the French doors. So the porch obviously would run this full side, and then it would run out its 12-foot width, and then there would be steps down into the yard. This photo on the left then is, again, French doors for point of reference, side, wrapping around to rear, and then I mentioned the door with the steps. So the porch essentially wraps around and concludes at this portion of the existing house. So this portion of the existing house stays the same as well. And then this is just sort of an extended view, again, that rear facade of the building. And the reason I included this photo in particular was, again, another point that's noted in my review letter and depicted on the site plan and noted by the petitioner, is there are multiple detached accessory buildings on this property. The ordinance establishes a maximum of 1, so I want to bring that to your attention as part of your consideration tonight. In looking at this in some detail, that provision is explicit to buildings. So I want to make sure that we're clear between a building and a structure. So to me, I view this as a structure, even though on the plan it's labeled as a shed. It is open roof and it is open sides. It is not enclosed. And that is essentially the distinction between a building and a structure. This is for sure a building. And then there's another one. It didn't come out in the photos, but there is another one off by the driveway. So that's some foreshadowing. So we'll talk more about that. So I referenced at the outset section 18.6A. I think at this point, this board is fully aware of these requirements, but for the sake of the public and our petitioner, I will reiterate them. So in order to expand a non-conforming building, there's a 3-step test that you have to meet. The first, the building can only be non-conforming on one side, so that's its front, its rear, or either side. The second is that non-conforming side has at least 90% of the required minimum setback. So in this case, front yard setbacks in R1B are 40 feet, so 36 foot would be your 90% line. So if this home were built at 36-foot setback, then it would be conceivable that it could be expanded without variance. The fact that it's at 80% means that it cannot be expanded without variance. And then the third point of that test is that whatever's being built has to fully comply. So again, the proposed addition encroaches into the front yard by 6 feet, so it does not fully comply. So only one of the 3 points are met. And that's what leads us here. We're here for 2 variances. The first is to expand a non-conforming residence that does not fully comply with 18.6. And the second is to permit a residential expansion, again, a covered porch, with a 34-foot setback in lieu of the 40-foot setback that would traditionally be required. On the right-hand side of the screen, section 23.5B is referenced. These are the review criteria for dimensional variances that the board is to apply when making your decision. You have the options of approval, approval with conditions, denial, or you could postpone or table action if you feel that additional information is needed. We could move it to a next month meeting and have the petitioner provide you with that information. So those are the options before you. And then this is just a quick slide summarizing the points in my full review letter. And I did not mention that is dated May the 19th. You all should have a copy of that. So my first point is, as I mentioned earlier, this residence can't be expanded without at least one variance. So the variance from 18.6 is necessary to expand this residence in any direction, even if that addition were compliant. The reason we're here for 2 variances is because that addition is not fully compliant. So the second variance, again, is from 3.5, and I did put forth in my review letter a couple of comments related to alternatives that I think should at least be discussed and or explored, and that would include the option for an uncovered porch or a partially covered porch. And I mention that because if it's uncovered or only partially covered at the point of the front yard setback, then porches without covers or enclosures are allowed to encroach into the front yard setback. I'm trying to get back to the site plan. So technically, were this just an open air porch, they would not necessarily be in front of you for that second variance. Well, not necessarily, they wouldn't be, I apologize. So they would be here still for the first variance, however.
What if it's cantilever? Does that matter?
There are, I think a bay window cantilever can only project 3 feet into the setback.
What about the porch itself?
Yeah, and I don't think that a porch is, I don't think a front yard encroachment is allowed, and if it is, it's only 3 feet. So this would still be a 6-foot encroachment. I can confirm that if you, let me grab the iPad real quick.
It's not permanent then, so to speak.
Sure, but it would still, yeah, it still would be an expansion because it's an expansion of the residence, and it still would have to meet either the setbacks or the allowable projections. And in this case, I don't believe that would.
Okay, thank you.
But it's any alternatives we can come up with and discuss are fair game for sure.
Thank you.
And so to that end, it is always nice to hear from the petitioner as to why they designed it the way they did. Did they consider compliant or more compliant alternatives, and whether or not they believe that any of the alternatives we've mentioned would be reasonable or feasible. And if they are not, then that would address the substantial justice test in this particular case. Again, I've mentioned that the home was built in the 1920s. I originally wanted to say the 20s, and then I realized that it's the 2020s, so I have to actually be clear now on the 1920s. Crazy, sorry, that's just me. Deficient front yard setback from current requirements, pretty understandable why and how that occurred. Getting to the extraordinary circumstance criterion, aside from the actual placement of the residence, which obviously was not under the owner's control, I really don't see any obvious conditions of the property that are unusual or unique. So it really, granting of a variance would really have to be tied to the placement of the residence. If the owner/petitioner feels that there are some additional unusual conditions that they want to present you with, then that would be kind of my follow-up question to them. That would be question number 2 that I would like them to address to the board, should you want more detail on that. As it relates to the vast majority of the remainder of the 14 criteria that we use, I do not foresee any adverse impacts to safety, traffic impediments, what am I trying to think of? Neighborhood character, land values, orderly development, access to light and air, all of those other standards that are meant to protect the neighborhood. I think the reality of this situation is, I think the value and the improvement put into this residence as proposed, I think can only benefit the neighborhood, personally. I do think investment into a home that is of that age, as opposed to someone just doing a tear down and rebuild, I think there's value in retaining it and allowing them some amount of improvement. I had to bring up those couple of points for discussion because it's my job to be nitpicky, as you all know. And then my closing comment is tied back to the reason that I made comment on those detached accessory buildings. So historically, this board has viewed the review of variances in relation to the spirit of the ordinance, which is to reduce and or gradually eliminate nonconformity throughout the township. We have used that in the past to sort of clean up other site deficiencies, if you will. And I bring that up only as it relates to the idea that there are upwards of maybe 2 detached accessory buildings. It would not be out of your realm as a condition if you were to consider approval of the request, if you wanted to include a condition that the detached accessory buildings be brought into compliance, that would be within certainly a reason and would be consistent with what other boards have done in the past. I will say that it's been probably several years since we've either been confronted with that situation or since we've gone down that path. But I wanted to make sure that you all understood. I know we do have a couple newer members, so I wanted to put that out there just for your consideration as well. That's all I have, Mr. Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Historical question. If I'm bringing up the 1928, was there no zoning requirement back then?
There was no zoning at all. Zoning did not exist in this community in 1928.
What's the date that we had the R1B zoning requirement?
R1B was the first ordinance, I think, was in the 60s. Whether R1B, if R1B was part of the original ordinance or if R1B got split off, I think it was, because R1A and R1B I think have always existed, because R1A is kind of the big waterfront, and R1B is generally the non-waterfront, or at least the non-river waterfronts. So along the canal even is
John?
R1B.
Can you shed some light on that?
Well, believe it or not, that was actually before my time.
Well, I didn't mean that you were here in 1928.
When the current owners bought the house recently, would they have been advised of the non-conformity?
Well, they wouldn't have been advised, but it existed for sure. Yes, when they purchased this home, R1B zoning definitely existed.
Yeah, my understanding is the same as Brian's about the 1960s. In the 1920s, there wasn't anything. You could do whatever you want, wherever you want.
Okay.
And that's just the way it was,
It's like Texas.
basically.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, Brian, thank you.
You're-
Well, what? John?
No,
Oh,
I thanked them for
I'm new up here, so I have to be careful. Mr. Starzak or Mrs. Starzak, whoever wants to, or both, please state your name and address for the record so Mrs. Zalewski can record everything. Thank you.
My name is Gina Starzik. That's Starzec. I'm present with my husband Andrew, and we reside at 9830 Church Road here on Groseal. So I'd like to thank you for hearing our appeal today. We purchased this home about 10 months ago. We closed on it July 31st of 2020 in the middle of the pandemic. The house didn't look like it looks now when we bought it. The house is in some significant, it was in a lesser condition than it is presently. My husband and I have worked quite hard over the last 10 months, even with the problems that COVID-19 brought us, trying to get this house looking nice. But I think we've done a pretty decent job so far. So if we can start. So I have actually, I think you all have been provided with my, nope, I'm fine. I think you've all been provided with my, no, these folders are, these pictures are fine. With my, my application packet. Okay, so I think I have, I guess I will just present, I have basically a three-prong argument that I think will surpass your objection to me having an entire covered porch. So it was discussed that perhaps this porch could be uncovered or only be partially covered. Well, the entire reason to have this porch is to have it be shady. And aesthetically speaking, should the porch start 6 feet back, which would be where my cursor is now, right around here, aesthetically would be my first argument that wouldn't look very nice. It's going to be less than half would be covered. It would be uneven. It would look, I would argue it would look unfinished. And it's not going to have balance from a design perspective. If you notice, there is a half roof that is along this entire side and this back side. And that's the line that we're using to do this covered porch. It will wrap from the side all the way around to the back, using that as a guide. And I would almost say that it may have always been intended that this property have some kind of porch area. When we first purchased it, there was a door here, right in this section right here. And perhaps it wasn't fiscally feasible at the time in 1928 when this property was built, but with the way this lays out, I wouldn't be surprised if a wraparound porch was always in the plans. And that's actually similar. There is a home one west of us that is larger than this home, but it's a farmhouse style and it has a wraparound covered porch that's not enclosed. So I think having the porch be covered and wrapped the entire way would keep with the architecture of the home, and I think it would keep with the historical integrity of this house. It's not uncommon for a house of this age to have a porch like that. My second argument would be having a staggered roof that wouldn't start until closer to the double doors. That's going to bring me uneven wear and tear on my property. So now the flooring is going to get uneven wear and tear. It's going to get sun, it's going to get rain, it's going to get snow that the rest of the porch is not going to get. And that's going to cause me to have a hurried replacement schedule for this 72 square foot portion of the porch, which is not my intention. I'm going to have to shovel that snow that's on there to keep my flooring looking decent. And now, if it's not covered from the end, I would argue that I will get blowing snow in front of these doors. That'll be wet. As you know, the underside of the porch will be warmer, that blowing snow will melt, and that will create ice in front of that door. And that will limit my egress in the wintertime from that door for me, my daughter, and I wouldn't want anyone else slipping and falling going out of that door. My strongest argument to have the entire area covered is going to be my foundational integrity. So when I purchased this house, there were some significant issues with the basement. My home inspector advised me to seek out a specialist, and I had a structural engineer come in and look at the basement. All 4 walls of this basement have significant tilt. This house being over nearly 100 years old, that's not uncommon. But the wall that has the most tilt is the east wall, and that's this wall right here. So per my structural engineer, that's not uncommon. It's caused by the saturated soil I see that is very common on the island. My lawn is wet. It's wet in the spring. It holds water. But that wet soil creates a hydraulic or a hydrostatic pressure against those walls that has provided a significant amount of what he called inward deflection of my blocks. So my basement is offset. So in order to fix that, I had 22 4-inch steel I-beams installed along the perimeter and 7 carbon Kevlar straps where I-beams wouldn't fit. I also had the joists replaced to stop the hump that was in the middle. We had the drainage corrected. It was the sump pump was improperly drained. We had that run out according to code. You can see that underneath the windows there, and it shoots out 15 feet from the house. Now, the best way that I, as a homeowner, can protect this foundation, which already has some issues, it's damp, it's wet, my basement smells like a wet basement, is to improve my drainage in this area. So by putting a roof over that area in its entirety, that will cause a 12-foot push away of water from that house and farther with my downspouts, which is my intention. I could very easily just try to seal off that basement, run the dehumidifier nonstop, but that's only a Band-Aid, and that's not going to fix the problem I have with drainage on this side. I need to keep water away from there. As you know, wet basements lead to tons of problems, not just mold, but they bring termites, beetles, carpenter ants enjoy wet areas, and I'm not trying to bring any more problems to this house. It's an old house. It has enough problems as it is. So we have worked quite hard to keep this house and make it better. And I think that's what we've done, and that's what I continue to attempt to do. You can see it's got all new windows. We did all new siding. We insulated the house. We've replaced all the appliances with high efficiency appliances. So now the house functions better and it feels better inside the house. I'm looking for this wraparound porch because it's going to be a nice place. We can sit outside, up off the grass, away from the bugs, out of the elements, where I can enjoy time with my family. We moved here from Groseal. We had a very small lot. We moved here from Wyandotte. We had a very small lot. We were at about 1/10 of an acre, which is common in Wyandotte, and we didn't have a lot of space. And the whole reason we bought this property was for her and for my dog to have all this space. And I'd like to be able to sit out in the shade and enjoy my yard.
Well, thank you.
Yep, yeah, thank you. I mean, are you all set?
Yeah, I guess
I passed by your house several times. I see some significant improvements. I think you guys are doing a really good job. I live not too far from there, so I see it all the time. You're doing a really good job with it so far.
Thank you. I will mention, he mentioned the accessory buildings. We bought this house not only with the basement problems and a 65-year-old boiler and no air conditioning, it also has no garage. We have every intention of building a garage, but currently, with the bridge situation, the massive increase in the cost of lumber, my garage is going to be delayed. I probably won't be able to build a garage for 2 years currently to be able to afford it. Now, he talked about this pergola that's already in the, where we've started taking it down. It was full of rocks and stones, and that's already, it goes out every week. A little bit goes out of it every week to the curb, so that is going out. And I fully anticipate not having all of these sheds once I have a garage and I can put my things into it. We move from a home with a garage, so we have things and we need to put them somewhere. So I'm happy to agree to remove them, but it's going to have to be with the caveat that I have to have a place to put them first.
I have a quick question, just so I understand.
Excuse me.
Yes, sir.
Art, do you have any comments before the board asks anything?
I think Gina did a nice job explaining some of the arguments and the reasons for the actual expansion and doing this porch. During all of the outside work, I've done almost everything I have by myself. We had contractors for the basement, HVAC, windows, but the landscaping and everything else has all been by my hand, and Gina's as well. We've had numerous neighbors come by. Everyone's been in support. They love it. I had one woman, I wish I had caught her name because it would be quite helpful now, but she lived on Highland, and she said that she actually diverted her walk to come by, and she said that there's this house and a house on Byramar that she prayed that someone like us would have bought the house to fix it up. And she said, my prayers have been answered. It sounds like a corny story, but I swear to God that happened. A lot of neighbors have liked it. And then the neighbor to our east is Frank Gladowski. His mother and father lived in this home for many, many years. And it was his intention, as well as his parents' intention, to build a deck at some point too. For whatever reason, they didn't get to it, but we're in a position to do that and hope to do that with your approval.
Sure. Does your daughter have anything to say, young lady?
Sign that note, remember?
You want to talk?
No? Okay, that's okay. That's okay.
Okay. With that being said, comments from the board.
I just wanted to confirm, Brian, make sure I understand. If this house were 40 feet from the property line in the front, which I believe is a south-facing sign, there would be no need to even have this meeting, right? And the extension that they're looking for, which goes to the east, that doesn't move them any closer to that south-facing property line. The only reason they need the variance is because they're within the 40 feet, right? Okay, so they're really a victim of the fact that their house was built in 1928 then. Is that's the general understanding of it then?
Well,
that's certainly part of the explanation, but
Okay.
again, you still have to deal with the fact that the addition also encroaches, which, again, I think you defer back to the comments from the petitioner.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Other board members? John?
I'll just say, just from my perspective, first of all, I think you did an excellent job in preparing materials. Very concise, very clear, and I thought your point was well taken. When I was out there looking at your residence this weekend, it was clear, all the improvements you made. I remember that house from when I would ride my bicycles past it years ago. And it's beautiful now.
Thank you.
And your intent is perfectly clear to me. And I for one, see no reason not to favorably consider this application. It's all in the vein of the same restoration. That's my thought.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I agree with you, John. Unfortunately, I brought my wife out when Gina came out and explained all the improvements, and now I am going to have to do some improvements in my house. She was very hospitable, and I think she mentioned, Andrew, that you are in construction, are you?
My father is. He's retired from Jerome Construction. He owned the company for about 30 years. Yes, I'm actually in law enforcement.
Anyone else on the board? Wait on. Anyone else on the board? Chuck? No. All right, I have a couple questions. First of all, you said that by meeting the setback per the ordinance, only half of your porch would be covered? How do you get that dimension?
On that side, there would be a huge gap.
It's 6 feet.
Right.
And looking at your house, it's certainly more than 6 feet. So I guess the half number was an exaggeration?
Yeah, I would agree that was an
Okay,
exaggeration.
fine. Who was your structural engineer?
I used HomeSpec. They're a company based out of Livonia. And my structural engineer was Mark Burr, B-U-H-R.
Don't think I know him, but yeah, I was in the business, so.
And I have
No, that's fine. I
my
believe you.
documents
I
from
believe
that
you.
also.
Okay, you talked about outside drainage and keeping the water away from that wall, which is a good thing. We all on this island, because of the clay soils, deal with water. And certainly your property can be regraded to take water away from that wall, whether you put a porch, a gazebo, or anything up there. So I'm not sure your argument about the porch for drainage is totally accurate. It appears, based on my inspections and counting the blocks, that 6 foot, you mentioned in your write-up, which is very good, by the way. It's one of the best I've seen since I've been on this board. Financially, you'd have to move your French doors. I'm not sure I understood that.
If you deny my application to have this porch, I now have doors on this side.
Well,
that I
we
will
wouldn't, pardon me, we would not deny the whole porch. We would only deny the last 6 feet. So your French doors would not be impacted, correct?
Correct,
Thank you.
except aesthetically.
Well, but aesthetically is not one of our main issues. It may be one of yours. Okay, that's all I have. Anybody else from the board? Anybody in the audience? Sir,
Yes,
please state your name and address for the record.
everybody said everything that I was gonna say. My name is Bob Jones. I live at 9756 Church Road. When I first moved in there, I seen the house. I went to a estate sale inside the house. And what Mr. and Mrs. Starzaks have done in the last 10 months is beautiful. They've done nothing but updated the community and the neighborhood. And I really, really continue or will think that they will continue upgrading their house. And I have no objection on anything at all what has been said. So they will continue upgrading our community and our neighborhood.
Thank you, Mr. Jones.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anything else from the board? Brian? Mr. and Mrs. Starzak, last chance?
No, thank you.
Further discussion from the board members? Hearing none? I did hear none.
Oh, yeah, that's good.
Okay. I would ask for a motion one way or the other.
I'll motion to approve both variances as requested.
I'll second that. Support.
Any discussion? Yeah, go ahead, John.
Friendly amendment,
Wait. Let John go,
Yep.
please.
just a friendly amendment that reinforces the commitment that once the garage is built, the sheds.
Yes, sir.
Agreed. Yep.
Good point.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Can we put a time on that? I know she's tied into the garage, and I fully appreciate the price of lumber, believe me. Brian, is that?
I would say, I want to say yes, because it's, it's tied to the spirit of the ordinance, as I mentioned earlier. It's a gradual improvement of nonconformity. Timeframes can be a little tricky, but they could always come in and seek an extension to some degree, I suppose.
I don't want this to go on ad infinitum.
Sure. I mean, I think what I would suggest is phrasing in the realm of, within X number of months or years, the detached accessory buildings will be brought into compliance. Because you could keep it general.
Yeah,
We just want compliance, whether she
I-
builds a garage or,
She only needs to get rid of one, right?
well, you can only have
Got
one.
3. She needs to get rid of 2.
But I think you said one of them wasn't a building, it was a structure.
One is not a building, but with the intent of constructing a if it's a detached garage,
that
then
comes down.
then this shed would have to go, as would the shed, but at the driveway. But realistically, if they're going to build a detached, it's going to be at the driveway, and that's going to have to go anyway.
I think Mr. Starzak, please.
I have a question and I guess a proposal. Well, first of all, once the garage is built, we have zero intention of having any of these structures whatsoever, other than the detached garage. My question is, when we purchased this home, which was considered on this half of the lot, there was a second lot here as well, which we then merged here through the township. My question is it one structure?
Section 23.5.
Lori, can you throw that in there? Good for you. Chuck, or
That's all, just, and
the 30-month amendment for the garage?
Well,
And
I think the amendment only has to be that the
the
outbuildings
non-conforming
be
outbuildings will be
whether they-
removed in 30 months, whether they build a garage or not.
Correct.
Right.
Squire, you're looking glum.
No, no.
Yes.
That the accessory buildings be brought into compliance. Because technically, if they don't build their garage, they can still keep one compliant accessory building. They don't have to remove all of them, so.
I agree.
point.
Motioner, we're all set with that. Everybody's in agreement once again. Lori, you got that? Mrs. Zaluski, you're wonderful. Applicants, please, Mrs. Starzak.
I guess my question now is regarding accessory buildings. Does a treehouse count as an accessory building? A child's?
Don't ask.
Oh, yeah, no, separate.
It's a structure and it's not tied to the ground, right? Yes, so I don't think it
Okay,
does.
thank you.
But I've seen some that I wonder about. That's why I prefer not to go down that road. That was, ignore that last guy out there in TV
We are
land.
going to vote.
Yeah, okay, so I will now call. Okay, do we need a roll call? Lori?
I have y'all down as all eyes.
We didn't vote yet.
Okay.
All in favor?
Do we need a roll call? I didn't think so.
I think we only do if we're on Zoom.
Yeah, I thought so too.
Thank you all very much. I appreciate
you're
it.
welcome.
We certainly love this township and have been very welcomed and appreciate it.
Yeah, it looks like you guys are doing a great job.
It
so-
does. Your house looks
really nice.
It does. It
Yeah.
does look
Get
good.
a freight bridge going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. That, you don't want to get me started on that. It's now 6:47. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.